4 months. That's how long I waited after my coworker smiled and accepted credit for a project I built from scratch, in front of our entire department. I didn't argue. I didn't call him out. Instead, I quietly collected proof. And when the opportunity came again, I made sure the truth landed exactly where it needed to. If you've ever had someone take credit for your work, you already know how infuriating that feels. So before we get into this story of quiet revenge and perfectly timed justice, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below if you've ever dealt with a workplace credit thief. Trust me, this one ends perfectly. Now, let's get into it. About a year ago, I was working at a mid-sized marketing agency. Not a huge corporate giant, but not a tiny startup either. Big enough that internal politics mattered, but small enough that reputation could make or break you. One morning, my director called me into her office. She had this excited look on her face. "We just landed a new client," she said. "It's a big campaign. I want you to run with it." That was it. No big team, no complicated structure. Just me and technically one other teammate assigned to help. I'll call him Dan. Now, on paper, Dan and I were both responsible for the campaign, but in reality, that project became my life. For the next 2 months, I lived and breathed that campaign. Late nights building strategy decks, hours researching market segments, writing the messaging, the content angles, the presentation. Every single slide, every single plan, every single detail, it all came from me. Dan, meanwhile, had a very different approach. He showed up to the weekly check-ins. He'd sit there, nodding thoughtfully. Every once in a while, he'd say something like, "Yeah, I like that direction," or "Maybe we could lean more into the brand story." Small comments, nothing groundbreaking. Then he'd disappear until the next meeting. At first, I didn't think much of it. Honestly, I didn't care. I liked the work. The campaign was interesting, creative, challenging, and I was proud of what I was building. Recognition wasn't the priority. Or at least, that's what I told myself. 2 months later, we had the all-hands meeting. This was the big internal presentation before we showed the campaign to the client. Everyone was there. Creative team, strategy team, account managers, directors. I remember sitting at the conference table watching the slides appear on the screen. Slides I had built. Slides I rewrote 5 times. Slides I knew every word of. The presentation went incredibly well. People were nodding, taking notes. Our director looked genuinely impressed. Then she stood up, smiled, and said the words I still remember perfectly. Dan really drove this one home. For a moment, I honestly thought I'd misheard, but she kept going. She started listing off specific pieces of the campaign: the messaging framework, the customer segmentation, the creative direction, all the things I had built. And then I looked over at Dan. He was smiling, just sitting there calmly, soaking it in. Finally, he said something. "Thanks, it was a great team effort," which somehow made it worse. Because technically that sentence sounded generous, but everyone in that room now believed he had led the project. I didn't say anything. I just sat there. My chest felt tight. My stomach twisted in that weird hollow way it does when something unfair happens and you can't immediately fix it. By the time I got home that night, I was genuinely gutted. I thought about confronting him. I thought about messaging my director. I thought about sending a long email explaining everything. But every option had the same risk. I would look bitter, petty, like I was trying to steal credit after the fact. And in corporate environments, that can backfire fast. So instead, I made a different decision. I would say nothing, but I would start keeping receipts. From that day forward, I saved everything. Every email where I outlined strategy ideas, every draft presentation, every document edit showing version history, every Slack message where Dan asked questions about work I had already completed, I even kept meeting summaries that clearly showed who presented which ideas. At first, it felt almost obsessive, but after a while, it became routine. Every time I finished a new piece of work, I added it to a folder. I titled it something simple, Campaign Archive. Inside it was 4 months of proof. And then I waited. Corporate karma is funny. Sometimes it takes time, but eventually the right moment appears. About 4 months later, the agency landed an even bigger client. This campaign was massive, higher budget, higher visibility, the kind of project that could seriously boost someone's career. During a team meeting, my director said something that immediately caught my attention. "We're going to have Dan lead this one again." Of course, from her perspective, Dan had proven he could handle a campaign like this. After the meeting ended, Dan came over to my desk. He leaned casually against the divider like we were old friends. "Hey," he said, "so I'm leading the new pitch." I just nodded. Then he said the part that almost made me laugh. "I was wondering if you could help out again, like last time." Help out, like last time. For a second, I considered calling him out right there, but instead, I smiled. "Sure," I said, "happy to help." The next morning, I walked into the office early. My heart was beating a little faster than usual. Not from nerves, from anticipation. I walked straight to my director's office. "Hey," I said, "do you have a minute?" She looked up from her laptop. "Of course." I sat down and said something very carefully. "I just wanted to walk you through everything I contributed to the previous campaign. I think there may have been some confusion about who built certain parts of it, and since we're starting another big project, I want to make sure the work is credited accurately going forward." She looked slightly surprised, but she nodded. "Okay," she said, "show me." I opened my laptop, then I opened the folder, and I started walking her through it. First the email threads, then the strategy documents, then the version histories showing every slide creation, time-stamped drafts, Slack conversations, research documents, every step of the campaign with my name attached to it. At first, she just watched quietly. Then she leaned back in her chair. Then she stopped talking entirely. The room got very quiet. Finally, she said something simple. "I see." That afternoon, something interesting happened. A meeting invitation went out to the team about the new campaign, but this time, Dan wasn't listed as the lead. I was. No big announcement, no dramatic confrontation, just a quiet correction. Later that day, my director stopped by my desk. She said, "You'll be leading the pitch moving forward." Then she added something else. "And this time, your name will be on every slide from the beginning." Across the office, Dan sat at his desk. He looked confused, then irritated, then very quiet. But he never said a word to me about it. A few weeks later, we presented the new campaign. This time, when the meeting started, my name was on the first slide. My name was on the strategy. My name was on every part of the work. And when the client loved the campaign, my director looked at the room and said something very different than last time. This was built by my name. And just like that, 4 months of quiet patience paid off. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it isn't dramatic. Sometimes the most satisfying justice comes from simply letting the truth speak for itself at exactly the right moment. If you enjoyed this quiet workplace revenge, hit like, subscribe for more real stories just like this, and tell me in the comments what's the worst case of someone stealing credit you've ever seen. Because let's be honest, workplace karma has a way of showing up eventually, and sometimes all you have to do is keep the receipts.